He was the suavest Bond of them all. Roger Moore, the man who defined charm, wit, and style on the silver screen. But behind the polished tuxedo and sly smile was a life filled with secrets, heartbreak, and one truly haunting discovery. From four marriages that ended in both glamour and scandal, to a distant relationship with his children, and a shocking truth about what he left behind. Roger Moore's story took a dark turn in his final years. Why was one of his homes mysteriously abandoned? What chilling detail was found inside it after his death? And what happened to the massive fortune he spent a lifetime building? The answers are deeper and more disturbing than you might think. Stay with us until the very end, because the most surprising and heartbreaking part of Roger Moore's legacy is something fans were never meant to see. Roger Moore's story begins in Stockwell, London, where he was born on October 14, 1927, the only child of Lillian Pope and George Moore, a local police officer who likely had no idea his son would one day become an international icon. Childhood for young Roger was shaped as much by war as by school books. When the bombs of World War II fell over London, he was evacuated from the chaos to the quiet of Holsworthy in Devon. From there, he bounced between schools, Battersea Grammar, Dr. Challoner's in Buckinghamshire, and Launceston College in Cornwall, never quite staying put, but always absorbing, adapting. Moore's earliest dreams weren't of Hollywood, but the arts still tugged at him. That tug led him to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, where he studied for 3 terms, just long enough to ignite a passion for performance. But life had other plans first. At 18, he was drafted for national service and soon found himself an officer in the Royal Army Service Corps, eventually stationed in West Germany. It wasn't all drills and discipline, though. Moore served in the Combined Services Entertainment section, where he got a taste of show business from the inside, out performing for troops and learning the ropes of entertainment under pressure. Commanding a small depot, he rose to the rank of captain, cool under fire even then. When the Army days ended, the screen called, though not with immediate fanfare. Roger started out in the shadows of the credits, taking on Blink and You'll Miss It, roles in films like Perfect Strangers, Caesar and Cleopatra, and Piccadilly Incident. He was there, present but peripheral, learning how the camera moved, how the light hit, how stories unfolded in flickering silver. In the early 1950s, before his voice became one of the most recognizable in cinema, he was the face of toothpastes, knitwear, and colognes, modeling his way through British magazines with a smirk and a brow that already suggested mischief. Then came the leap across the Atlantic. The allure of American television drew Moore westward, where he began carving out a presence not just in studios but in living rooms. He landed parts in adaptations of Julius Caesar and Black Chiffon, and stepped into the anthology world of Robert Montgomery presence with quiet confidence. These roles weren't blockbusters, but they laid the groundwork, deliberate brick by brick, for the dashing, unflappable persona that would eventually make him a global star. In 1954, Roger Moore stepped onto the Hollywood stage with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his time would come. MGM, the grand old studio of stars and dreams, signed him to a 7-year contract, eager to mold this tall, polished Brit into their next leading man. His debut was modest, a supporting role in The Last Time I Saw Paris, a romantic drama starring the radiant Elizabeth Taylor. It wasn't headline stuff, but it placed Moore in the swirl of big league cinema. From there, he swung into Interrupted Melody, a biographical musical, then brandished a sword in the swashbuckler The King's Thief. But perhaps his most high-profile early turn came in Diane, where he portrayed Prince Henri of France, noble, poised, and decked in history. Yet the film failed to connect with audiences, and with box office numbers flatlining, MGM quietly let Moore go. Just like that, his Hollywood fairy tale hit pause. But Moore was never one to sit still. With his film career in limbo, he turned. his gaze toward television, a medium on the rise, brimming with opportunity. He popped up in popular anthology shows like Ford Star Jubilee, Lux Video Theater, and Matinee Theater, bringing a touch of elegance to the small screen. Then, in 1958, the tide shifted. Roger strapped on armor and mounted a horse to play the chivalrous Sir Wilfrid of Ivanhoe in Ivanhoe, his first major TV role. The series gave him exposure and honed his knack for playing noble yet roguish characters, something that would soon become his signature. Western fever was sweeping across the Atlantic, and Moore saddled up once again for The Alaskans, a short-lived series set in the Gold Rush era. It ran for 37 episodes, long enough for audiences to take notice, but not quite enough to leave a lasting mark. After that came Maverick, a hit Western series he joined in its 4th season. But Moore, ever the professional, grew weary of weak scripts and thin storytelling. He exited after 14 episodes, trading in spurs for a more polished kind of charm. Then came the breakthrough, the role that would turn Roger Moore into a television icon. In 1962, he stepped into the suave shoes of Simon Templar, the witty, jet-setting anti-hero of The Saint. With a raised eyebrow and a perfectly tailored suit, Moore turned this Robin Hood of the modern age into a global sensation. Based on Leslie Charteris's novels, the series blended mystery, action, and cool-headed cleverness with a cocktail of dry humor. It ran until 1969, crossing the Atlantic and making Moore a star in both Britain and the United States. He wasn't just acting, he was defining a type, smooth, unflappable, and just a little dangerous. Fresh off The Saint, Moore wasn't about to coast. He teamed up with American star Tony Curtis for The Persuaders, a stylish action comedy that followed two wealthy playboys gallivanting through Europe, solving crimes, charming women, and generally having far more fun than anyone should. Though it only ran for 1 season, the chemistry between Moore and Curtis gave the show a lasting cult following. By now, Roger Moore had carved out his own niche. He wasn't just a leading man, he was the leading man for a certain kind of escapist adventure. When Sean Connery finally hung up his Walther PPK for good, the question of who would don the tuxedo and carry the legacy of James Bond loomed large. Enter Roger Moore. Suave, unflappable, and already a television icon, Moore was hand-picked by producer Albert Broccoli to take over the role that had become one of cinema's most coveted. In 1973, he made his debut as 007 in Live and Let Die, a bold new Bond for a new decade. The film swapped Cold War grit for voodoo, crocodiles, and Harlem intrigue, and it paid off spectacularly at the box office, signaling that Bond had successfully reinvented himself once again. Next came The Man with the Golden Gun, featuring Christopher Lee as a golden pistol-wielding assassin. Though it didn't quite reach the explosive heights of its predecessor, it kept Moore firmly in the spy spotlight. Then came the film that truly cemented his legacy, The Spy Who Loved Me. Released in 1977, it combined sleek espionage, underwater cities, and a towering henchman named Jaws. With a modest budget of $13.5 million, it raked in a staggering $185 million worldwide and became a defining entry in the franchise. Moore had made the role his own. From there, he launched into orbit with Moonraker, a sci-fi tinged adventure that capitalized on the post-Star Wars space craze. While critics were divided, audiences showed up in droves. Moore's Bond returned to Earth with For Your Eyes Only, a more grounded tale that leaned back into the grit of espionage. And though he often hinted that it was time to pass the martini, producers kept luring him back. In 1983, he returned for Octopussy, a globe-trotting romp that proved the franchise and Moore still had staying power. Finally, in 1985, he gave his last performance as Bond in A View to a Kill. At 58, he was the oldest actor to play the iconic spy, trading punches and flirtations with the same effortless flair, if a touch more tongue-in-cheek. Moore's take on Bond was a marked shift from Ian Fleming's cold-blooded killer. Gone was the brooding lone wolf. In his place was a cosmopolitan playboy with a raised eyebrow and a pun for every occasion. Where Connery might threaten, Moore would charm. He brought levity to the role, a sense of mischief wrapped in fine tailoring that matched the glitzier, looser vibe of the 1970s and early 80s. His Bond didn't just save the world, he made it look like fun. Yet Roger Moore's cinematic journey didn't begin or end with Bond. Before his license to kill came films like The Miracle, The Sins of Rachel Cade, Gold of the Seven Saints, Crossplot, and The Man Who Haunted Himself, a psychological thriller that revealed deeper shades of his talent. In the 1970s, he took on rugged roles in action-packed adventures such as Gold, That Lucky Touch, Shout at the Devil, The Wild Geese, Escape to Athena, and North Sea Hijack. Moore brought his signature blend of refinement and resolve to every frame, whether he was navigating political intrigue or outwitting mercenaries. During the 80s, he balanced his Bond work with films like The Sea Wolves, the romantic anthology Sunday Lovers, the high-octane ensemble comedy The Cannonball Run, and detective fare like The Naked Face. After retiring from MI6, Moore took a well-earned break from the screen, stepping away from film for 5 years. But the draw of the camera never left him. In 1990, he returned in Fire, Ice, and Dynamite, followed by Bullseye, a light-hearted caper alongside fellow British legend Michael Caine. His later years saw a series of eclectic and often self-aware roles. He played a ghost in The Man Who Wouldn't Die, a mentor in The Quest with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and made cameo appearances in cult pop curiosities like Spice World and the comedic cruise misadventure boat trip. Even when the spotlight dimmed, Moore maintained a playful relationship with his persona, never afraid to poke fun at the image he had so carefully cultivated. Through it all, Roger Moore remained unmistakably himself, polished but not pretentious, charming yet approachable, a screen presence that felt as at home in a tuxedo as it did leaping from helicopters. At the time of his passing in 2017, Sir Roger Moore had amassed a net worth estimated at $110 million. A fitting testament to a career that spanned more than 6 decades and left an indelible mark on both film and television. Mansion in Cotswolds. Perched high above the rolling green quilt of the English countryside, Appleton House sits like a quiet sentinel of elegance and history. Nestled in the heart of the Cotswolds, an area known for its golden limestone villages, whispering woodlands, and centuries-old charm, this home offers not just a place to live, but a place to step back into time without sacrificing a moment of modern comfort. The house lies in the sleepy village of Stinchcombe, just south of Gloucester, on the dramatic edge of the Cotswold Escarpment. From its rear terrace, panoramic views unfurl across sweeping fields and the distant curve of fairways from the neighboring Stinchcombe Hill Golf Course. It's easy to imagine Roger Moore standing there in the 1960s, martini in hand, soaking in the scenery between shoots for The Saint. Before he became Bond, James Bond, he called this estate home, renting it for several years and leaving behind a whisper of his suave legacy. Built in 1935, Appleton House is a striking blend of Edwardian poise and arts and crafts warmth. A sweeping drive leads up to the main entrance, giving visitors their first glimpse of the stone-mullioned windows and handsome lead-light glass that hint at the craftsmanship within. Inside, there's a peaceful sense of balance. Elegant wooden floors underfoot, vaulted half-pitched ceilings overhead, and rooms bathed in soft, natural light. The drawing room, with its open fireplace, offers a cozy nucleus to the home, perfect for reading by firelight or lingering with a nightcap. Off the kitchen, a garden room stretches toward the views, blurring the line between house and landscape. There's space here, not just in square footage, but in soul. The main house boasts 6 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms, comfortably spread, out to accommodate both daily living and grand entertaining. An orangery opens onto a wide rear terrace where sunsets paint the horizon in watercolor tones. The grounds sprawl over 2.8 acres, including mature woodland, manicured lawns, and a series of outdoor features that feel like scenes from a novel. A classical reflecting pool framed by a decorative bridge and a pillared pergola, a detached garage, turned gym with an office perched above it, and even an attached studio with its own terrace. Despite its grandeur, the home is surprisingly unencumbered by historical restrictions. It is not listed, which has allowed for thoughtful updates and modern amenities. Still, its original charm remains untouched, quietly declaring its presence in every stone and beam. For those drawn to nature, the location is nearly unbeatable. The estate borders the famed Cotswold Way, a long-distance walking trail that winds through ancient woods, wildflower meadows, and postcard-perfect villages. Just a short drive down the hill lies the market town of Dursley for everyday essentials, while cultural hubs like Cheltenham, Bristol, and Gloucester are within reach for fine dining, festivals, and everything in between. Literary history seeps through the surrounding soil. Evelyn Waugh, who penned Brideshead Revisited, once lived nearby in Watton-under-Edge. Even William Tyndale, the 15th century scholar who first translated the Bible into English, was born in the village. Proof that the air here has long been conducive to great minds and creative souls. Roger Moore Mansion in Denham. Tucked away behind a veil of English countryside charm, Sherwood House in Denham is a world apart from the high-octane glamour of casinos, speedboats, and martinis, but that's exactly what made it the perfect off-screen lair for Sir Roger Moore. Just 20 miles west of London, this sprawling estate served as Moore's sanctuary during the height of his Bond years, when he was slipping into the Tux and Walther PPK for Live and Let Die, The Man with the Golden Gun, and The Spy Who Loved Me. From the outside, Sherwood House is the picture of English aristocratic elegance. Built in the 1920s, its red brick facade, tall chimneys, and steeply pitched roof exude timeless dignity. You might expect a Bond actor to live in a steel and glass modernist bunker, but remember, those were always the villain's lairs. Bond himself, he leaned more traditional, and Moore, ever the refined gentleman, found his peace in this stately country manor with ivy at the walls and fresh country air to breathe between blockbuster scripts. Inside, the house whispers stories of its former inhabitants without ever raising its voice. The interiors are warm, expansive, and purpose-built for comfort and leisure. The 5-bedroom estate includes a classic drawing room, a cozy wood-paneled library, and a study that practically begs you to sit with a scotch and a vintage spy novel. A gym, a conservatory, and a full snooker room round out the amenities, not to mention a wine cellar that likely hosted more than a few intimate gatherings during Moore's stay. The heart of the home, the kitchen, marries bright white cabinetry with rustic wooden floors, blending modern ease with country charm. And if you've got guests, they'll be more than comfortable. The estate spans 11 acres and includes both an annex and a guest house. Plenty of room for a few fellow MI6 operatives or visiting dignitaries. Step outside and you're greeted by rolling green lawns and mature landscaping, complete with a serene swimming pool tucked into the grounds, like a private lagoon. It's not hard to imagine Moore lounging poolside in the 1970s, freshly returned from a film set in Thailand or the Bahamas, still wearing his Bond swagger like a second skin. Though Moore moved on, eventually taking up residence in Monaco and Switzerland, raise an eyebrow at your leisure, Sherwood House has retained its debonair energy. It's had only 2 owners since, both of whom have cared for it with the same meticulous attention one might reserve for an Aston Martin DB5. Now, the manor is up for sale once again, inviting a new chapter in its storied past. It's not just bricks and beams, it's a piece of cinematic history, a lived-in memoir of one of the most iconic Bonds to ever don the tuxedo. A place where elegance met espionage, if only in spirit. Sherwood House isn't flashy. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. Like Sir Roger Moore himself, it's classic, composed, and enduringly cool. When you think of Roger Moore and cars, the mental film reel clicks straight to tuxedos, gadgets, and high-speed Bond chases. Let's begin with perhaps the most eyebrow-raising vehicle in Moore's modern-day life, an electric smart car. Yes, that's right, Bond, James Bond, zipping through the tiny streets of Monaco in something no larger than a suitcase with wheels. He didn't pick it for the thrill of speed or style, but simply because Monaco's tight parking spaces don't lend themselves to Aston Martins. It's an unintentional piece of irony that might make Q wince, but it shows that practicality sometimes trumps panache, even for a secret agent. Then there's the Renault 5, France's humble hatchback, known more for baguette runs than car chases. Most would associate Roger Moore with sleek Jaguars or suave Lotuses, not this unassuming slice of Gallic economy. Yet in his off-screen hours, he apparently zipped around in one. There's a certain charm in picturing Sir Brett Sinclair, the silk-suited aristocrat of the Persuaders, behind the wheel of a slightly weathered Renault 5. It adds a layer of grounded realness to a man we often associate with larger-than-life roles. More in line with his classic cool persona was the 1956 Jaguar XK150. During his early Hollywood days under contract with MGM, Moore was often seen cruising the California hills in this elegant beast. The romance, however, was rocky. The Jaguar developed a nasty habit of stalling, forcing Moore into a showdown with the dealership on Hollywood Boulevard. Told he'd have to wait 2 days for a service, Moore calmly suggested he'd drive it straight through their showroom glass for publicity, channeling a very Bond-like threat long before the man with the golden gun. The car was promptly repaired, and the big cat never gave him trouble again. It's hard to imagine a more poetic interaction between British elegance and British resolve. Then there's the Volvo P1800, the vehicle most closely associated with his breakout role in The Saint. A shimmering white P1800S was gifted to Moore as part of a promotional agreement with the show's producers. But this wasn't just a studio prop. It became his personal ride, his companion on and off set. While others might chase Ferraris and Lamborghinis, Moore stayed loyal to the Swedish coupe's modest charm and handsome silhouette. The P1800 would later evolve into a more modern Volvo C70 in his Monaco years, proving that flashy Bond cars aside, Sir Roger had a real thing for understated elegance. But topping the list is a car so off-script it could have been written into a Bond parody, the Rover SD1 3500. A Midas gold sedan with brutish lines and a V8 rumble, this wasn't a car. For red carpets, it was the thinking man's muscle saloon. Despite Lotus's heavy promotional campaign during The Spy Who Loved Me, Moore quietly took delivery of the Rover at Pinewood Studios in 1976. Records show it vanished from the roads in 1983, likely scrapped, but its legacy lingers as a peak example of automotive anti-flash. The SD1 was cool because it didn't try to be, and in that sense, it was the most Roger Moore of them all. In the end, Moore's real-life rides weren't about posing or power plays. They were about character, flawed, fascinating, and unapologetically human. Roger Moore may have been world-famous for his roles as suave spies and charming adventurers, but behind the polished tuxedo and effortless wit was a man deeply committed to causes that mattered far more to him than the glint of the spotlight. His journey into humanitarian work began with quiet admiration. Watching his friend Audrey Hepburn devote herself to UNICEF left a lasting impression on him, so much so that in August 1991, he followed in her footsteps and became a UNICEF Goodwill ambassador. It wasn't entirely new ground for him. Decades earlier, his character Simon Templar had already made an appeal for UNICEF during an episode of The Saint in 1964, hinting even then at the heart behind the persona. Years later, he would lend his unmistakable voice to Father Christmas in UNICEF's animated short, The Fly Who Loved Me, making the magic of kindness feel just a bit more real for children around the world. But Roger's compassion didn't end with human suffering. In his later years, he became an unwavering advocate for animal welfare, bringing the same passion and clarity to that fight as he had to any dramatic role. His collaboration with PETA was not simply token celebrity involvement, it was hands-on, heartfelt, and often personal. He lent his voice to hard-hitting exposés against foie gras in 2006 and again in 2012, and didn't hesitate to fund campaigns out of his own pocket. He wrote articles, reached out to businesses, and even addressed politicians directly. In 2009, his efforts were recognized when he was named PETA UK's Person of the Year, a year that also saw his campaign help convince the luxury department store Selfridges to stop selling foie gras. Another victory came in 2012, when a proposed foie gras facility in China was scrapped following his vocal opposition. Roger's advocacy extended beyond the dinner plate. He publicly spoke out on the plight of Morgan, a wild-caught killer whale kept in captivity, and played a leading role in the successful movement to ban wild animals from British circuses. His stance against sport hunting was fierce and unequivocal. When the killing of Cecil the lion triggered global outrage, Moore didn't mince words. In an opinion piece for The Telegraph, he called it what he believed it was: a sickness, a perversion, a moral failing. People who get their amusement from hunting and killing defenseless animals can only be suffering from a mental disorder, he wrote. He believed that true enjoyment of nature came not from domination, but from reverence, through hiking, photography, and simply sharing space with wildness rather than destroying it. In the end, Roger Moore used his fame not to amplify his own legend, but to shine light on those without a voice: vulnerable children, abused animals, endangered wildlife. He didn't just play heroes, he quietly became one. Roger Moore's personal life unfolded like a long-running drama, equal parts romance, heartbreak, chaos, and quiet redemption, played out far from the film sets and red carpets that made him famous. It began in 1946, when the young 18-year-old Moore married Dorn Van Stein, a fellow RADA student who doubled as an ice skater and actress and was 6 years his senior. They lived in Streatham with her family, a setup that was far from glamorous and, over time, became toxic. Financial strain and Van Stein's doubt in his talent gnawed at their marriage, and behind closed doors, Moore endured alleged abuse that left its own invisible marks. Then came Dorothy Squires, a flame that burned hotter and wilder. The Welsh singer was 12 years older than Moore, and their relationship, beginning in 1952, was nothing short of tempestuous. After marrying in New York, they settled in Kent, and then, in the pursuit of stardom, moved to the United States in 1954. But even Hollywood couldn't smooth the cracks. Age differences, career struggles, and Moore's growing affection for the young starlet. Dorothy Provine strained the marriage. They returned to England in 1961, where miscarriages and heartbreak haunted the couple. Moore would later reflect that things might have been different had they been able to start a family. Squires, fiercely emotional and unwilling to let go, didn't take betrayal quietly. Their relationship descended into a blur of flying bricks, broken glass, and lawsuits. She once hurled a guitar at his head. When she discovered his affair with Italian actress Luisa Mattioli, his eventual third wife, Squire shattered a window, reached through the jagged shards to grab his shirt, and cut herself in the process. When police arrived, her response was theatrical and raw. "It's my heart that's bleeding." In time, she would wage war through the courts, including attempts to publish private letters from Mattioli. Moore and Mattioli successfully blocked their release, prompting more lawsuits until Squires was officially labeled a vexatious litigant in 1987. Still, in a gesture of unexpected grace, Moore paid her hospital bills during her final battle with cancer. She died in 1998. The The relationship with Luisa Mattioli began in the early 1960s on a film set in Italy. Squires, refusing to accept the split, even sued Moore for loss of conjugal rights. He refused to comply with a court order demanding his return. She smashed windows at the couple's home in France and unsuccessfully sued actor Kenneth More for referring to Mattioli as Moore's wife. Only in 1969, 7 years after their de facto separation, did Squires finally agree to a divorce, and Moore married Mattioli in a media frenzy at Caxton Hall in London. Hundreds screamed his name outside as he wed the woman who had stood by him through scandal and separation. Together, Moore and Mattioli had 3 children: Deborah, Jeffrey, and Christian. Deborah followed in her father's footsteps into acting. Jeffrey dabbled in film, co-starred with his father, launched a high-end restaurant in Mayfair, and in 2023 released a single under the name Jaffa Moore, featuring vocals from the late Naya Rivera and a constellation of celebrities in the music video. Christian carved a path in film production, raising a family of his own, while Moore, quietly proud, watched his legacy ripple into the next generation. But even that chapter closed. In 1993, a diagnosis of prostate cancer forced Moore to re-examine everything. The illness was, in his words, life-changing. Amid that shift, he developed feelings for Christina Kiki Tholstrup, a Swedish-born Danish socialite and longtime friend of Mattioli's. It was the beginning of the end for his third marriage. Mattioli, feeling betrayed, wrote a book that spared no one. Moore, ever discreet, refused to respond publicly, choosing instead to protect his children from further pain. The divorce dragged on until 2000, settled for $10 million. In 2002, Roger Moore married Christina Tholstrup. After decades of turbulence, he had found peace. She was, as he described, serene, organized, loving, a grounding force in a life that had long swirled with drama. "When we are traveling for my job, she is the one who packs," he once said. "Christina takes care of all that." There were no arguments, only calm. Through her, Moore gained 2 stepchildren, including Christina Knudsen, who credited him with being a healing presence in her life. When she died of cancer in 2016, Moore was devastated, writing, "We are heartbroken. We were all with her, surrounding her with love at the end." Roger Moore's political views were straightforward and rooted in his belief in conservatism as the best way to govern a country. A lifelong supporter of the Conservative Party, he openly endorsed them during the 2001 general election. Yet, Moore was careful to keep a respectful distance from overt political activism, feeling that his humanitarian work with UNICEF required a certain neutrality, a role above partisan squabbles. Still, his convictions came through clearly. In 2011, he praised then Prime Minister David Cameron for his stance on the European Union, calling out dissenters within Cameron's own party as traitors and urging loyalty to leadership. Moore was fiercely proud of British independence, especially regarding the nation's currency. He was relieved Britain never adopted the euro, joking that losing the Queen's face from pound notes and stamps would have been unthinkable. "I am British and fiercely independent," he declared, likening his stance to Sean Connery's Scottish pride. His devotion to tradition extended to cultural matters, too. In 2015, Moore voiced concern about what he saw as excessive political correctness creeping into the film industry. He opposed rewriting James Bond's character to change his sexuality, gender, or ethnicity, arguing that staying true to the original was paramount, not out of prejudice, but out of respect for the essence of the character. Throughout his life, Moore maintained membership in the entertainment union BECTU, dating back to his early days as an apprentice animation technician. By the time of his passing, he was its longest-serving member. Beyond politics, Moore stood with workers fighting for their livelihoods, such as when he supported the protesting employees of the Cadbury chocolate factory facing closure in 2007. Moore's Financial choices reflected a practical response to the economic realities of his time. In 1978, he became a tax exile, initially moving to Switzerland. Over the years, his life was split among 4 homes: luxurious retreats in Monte Carlo, Tuscany, the Swiss Alps, and the south of France. He even became a resident and goodwill ambassador of Monaco, a role through which he promoted the principality internationally. Despite his affection for Monaco, he expressed frustration with the influx of Russian wealth reshaping its character, wryly noting that restaurant menus had turned Russian. On the topic of his tax exile status, Moore was frank and unapologetic. In the late 1970s, high taxes under the Labor government left him little choice. His advisors had urged the move to protect his livelihood, as tax rates soared as high as 98% on unearned income. Still, Moore emphasized that he often returned to England, paid taxes when earning well, and had no desire to sever ties with his homeland. Moore's life was also marked by a history of health challenges that began in childhood, with bouts of chickenpox, measles, mumps, double pneumonia, and jaundice, alongside surgeries to remove his appendix, tonsils, and adenoids. Throughout his career, he endured ongoing struggles with kidney stones, even requiring hospital stays during the filming of Live and Let Die and Moonraker. On the set of Live and Let Die, he suffered a speedboat crash that left him with a fractured tooth and concussion. During The Spy Who Loved Me, he was badly burned in a stunt accident. In 1993, a prostate cancer diagnosis proved a turning point, but he successfully underwent treatment. Later health setbacks included collapsing on stage in 2003 and needing a pacemaker for a dangerously slow heartbeat. Diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2013, Moore also faced a liver tumor discovered years before his final illness. In 2017, while battling cancer, a fall resulted in a serious collarbone injury. Roger Moore passed away peacefully on May 23, 2017, at his home in Crans, Montana, Switzerland, surrounded by family. His death, caused by cancers of the lung and liver, closed the final chapter on a life that spanned 9 decades and countless roles. His resting place is Monaco Cemetery, marked simply but lovingly. Sir Roger Moore, 1927-2017, loving father, and husband, our true saint. Amidst rows of white memorials, flowers and candles bear witness to the affection of those he left behind, an enduring testament to a man who was more than just a screen legend.